There are nights when the past doesn't just visit. It moves in, unpacks its bags, and refuses to leave. For me, those nights began 5 years ago, on a Tuesday that started like any other and ended with a phone call that shattered my world into pieces so small I'm still finding them embedded in my skin. My wife, Emma, was gone. Not sick, not missing, gone. Dead at 32 because someone ran a red light at 45 miles per hour, T-boned her sedan on the driver's side and kept going for another 100 yards before the wreckage of both vehicles finally stopped sliding across wet asphalt. The man who killed her walked away with a broken collarbone and minor lacerations. Emma died on impact, they told me, as if that clinical detail was supposed to make it easier. It didn't. Nothing did. His name was Michael Torres. 47 years old, insurance adjuster, father of 2. No prior record. The police file said he'd been reaching for something that fell on the floor. His phone, probably. And never saw the light change. 3 seconds of distraction. 3 seconds, and my wife was dead. I never said his name out loud after that first week. I couldn't. It felt like giving him space in my mouth, in my breath, in the air I shared with Emma's memory. At the trial, if you could call it that, I sat in the back row, far enough away that I wouldn't have to see his face clearly. His lawyer negotiated it down to vehicular manslaughter with mitigating circumstances. 18 months in county, eligible for parole in 9. My wife's life, measured in months. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I shook my head. What was there to say? No arrangement of words would bring her back. No sentence would equal the one I was already serving. I left the courthouse before the sentencing was finalized. I couldn't breathe in that room, couldn't sit there while they discussed his future, his rehabilitation, his second chance. Emma didn't get a second chance. She didn't get to finish the book on her nightstand, or wear the dress she'd bought for our anniversary dinner next month, or tell me about her day the way she did every evening, sitting cross-legged on our kitchen counter while I cooked. She didn't get old. She didn't get anything. And I was supposed to sit there and listen to his lawyer talk about remorse, about how deeply sorry he was, about his own children who needed their father. I walked out into October sunlight that felt obscene in its warmth and normalcy, got in my car, and drove until I ran out of gas somewhere north of the city. A gas station attendant found me sitting in the empty vehicle 2 hours later, staring at nothing. He knocked on the window, asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I haven't been since. The first year was fog, dense, suffocating fog where days bled into nights, and I moved through them like a ghost haunting my own life. I stopped going to work after 3 months. The IT firm was understanding at first, then concerned, then quietly suggested I take an indefinite leave. I stopped answering my phone, stopped responding to emails. Emma's family tried to include me in their grief, her mother calling weekly, her sister showing up unannounced with casseroles I never ate. I appreciated it in theory, but in practice, their sadness felt like an invasion. This was my pain, my loss, and sharing it required an energy I simply didn't have. Eventually, they stopped trying as hard. I don't blame them. I was a black hole of need and anger, and who wants to orbit that? I developed rituals. Every morning I made 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one that I'd pour down the sink. Every night I set 2 places at the table, ate from one and stared at the other until the food went cold. I kept her clothes in the closet, her toothbrush in the holder, her pillow on her side of the bed. The house became a shrine, and I was its sole worshipper, performing ceremonies that kept her present in small, devastating ways. Friends, the few who persisted, suggested therapy, grief counseling, support groups. I went once to a church basement where 8 people sat in folding chairs and talked about their dead. A woman whose husband died of cancer said she'd found peace through faith. A man whose daughter overdosed said time was healing him slowly. They all seemed to be moving forward, processing, integrating their losses into new narratives. I had no new narrative. I had rage. Because here's what nobody tells you about grief, It's not just sadness. It's not just missing someone. It's fury. It's lying awake at 3 in the morning, imagining scenarios where you could have prevented it, where you'd called her 5 minutes earlier or later, where you'd convinced her to work from home that day, where the universe bent just slightly differently and she was still breathing. It's imagining him, Michael Torres, living his life, eating meals, watching television, being alive while she was ash in an urn I couldn't bring myself to scatter because scattering felt final, and I wasn't ready for final. I was stuck in the before, in the life we had, in the future we'd planned, and forward movement felt like betrayal. I looked him up once, late at night, drunk on whiskey and insomnia. Social media made it easy. There he was, family photos, vacation snapshots, birthday celebrations. His kids looked happy. His wife smiled. He smiled. 9 months after killing my wife, there he was at a baseball game, hot dog in hand, captured mid-laugh. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned, until the laptop screen swam with tears, until the rage in my chest felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside. How dare he laugh? How dare he have moments of joy? How dare he continue? I wanted to hurt him. God help me, I wanted to make him feel what I felt, to hollow him out and fill the space with nothing. But I didn't, because Emma wouldn't have wanted that. And because on some level deeper than rage, I knew it wouldn't help. Hurting him wouldn't bring her back. Nothing would. So I closed the laptop, finished the whiskey, and added another sleepless night to the tally. Year 2 was anger calcified into routine. I moved through days with mechanical precision. Wake, coffee, stare at nothing, eat something, stare at more nothing, sleep fitfully, repeat. I picked up freelance work, just enough to pay bills and keep the house. Emma's life insurance money sat untouched in an account I never looked at. Using it felt wrong, like profiting from her death. I let mail pile up, let the lawn grow wild, let the gutters clog and the paint peel and the world outside my windows become irrelevant. Emma's mother stopped calling. Emma's sister sent cards on holidays, generic, careful cards that didn't mention Emma or the accident or me. I didn't respond. I was unreachable, and I preferred it that way. I saw him once, by accident, in a grocery store parking lot during year 3. I'd forced myself out of the house for basic supplies, and there he was, loading bags into his trunk. I recognized him from the trial, from the photos, from the nightmares. He looked ordinary, tired, older, human. I stood frozen by my car, watching him, and for a moment our eyes met across 30 feet of asphalt. I don't know if he recognized me. I don't know if he thought about Emma every day or if he'd moved on, filing her death away as a terrible mistake, a tragic accident, something he'd paid for and could now forget. I'll never know, because I didn't walk over, didn't speak, didn't do anything except get in my car with shaking hands and drive home, where I sat in the dark for 6 hours trying to remember how to breathe normally. The proximity to him, the physical nearness to the person who'd destroyed my life, left me feeling skinned, exposed, like every nerve was on the outside. Year 4 brought numbness, the sharp edges of grief dulled into a constant low-grade ache, background radiation I'd learned to live with. I started running, early mornings before sunrise, long distances that left me too exhausted to think. The physical pain was easier than the emotional kind, easier to feel my lungs burn and my legs scream than to feel the crushing weight of her absence. I ran the same route every day, through downtown, past the intersection where she died, past the courthouse, past the hospital where they'd pronounced her. Punishing myself, maybe, or trying to desensitize myself to the geography of tragedy. It didn't work. Every time I passed that intersection, I slowed down, looked at the traffic light, and imagined her final moments. Did she see the other car coming? Did she have time to be afraid? Or was it instant, 1 second alive and the next just gone? The not knowing was its own torture. I started writing letters I never sent, long, rambling letters to Emma, to her family, to him, to Michael Torres, whose name I still couldn't say aloud but could finally write. Dear Michael, I would start and then fill pages with rage, with questions, with accusations, with pleas to understand how he lived with himself. I never mailed them. They went into a box under my bed, hundreds of pages of anguish that no one would ever read. Writing them helped, though. It gave the anger somewhere to go other than into my body, where it was slowly poisoning me from the inside. My doctor, I'd finally started seeing one again, said my blood pressure was dangerously high, that stress was destroying my organs, that I needed to find healthier ways to process. I nodded and ignored him. What did healthy processing look like when your wife was dead and her killer was free? Because he was free, by then. Paroled after 11 months for good behavior. 11 months for a life. The math didn't work, would never work. But that was the system. Justice, they called it. I called it Wednesday. Just another day, another proof that the universe was indifferent and cruel and moved forward, whether you were ready or not. Emma's sister reached out when she heard about his release, a tentative text asking if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was a collection of broken pieces held together by routine and spite, and his freedom felt like another theft. He'd taken Emma, and now he'd taken even the cold comfort of knowing he was suffering consequences. He was out there, living, and I was here, barely existing, and the unfairness of it was a weight I carried in my chest like stones. Year 5 started with a dream. Emma and I were in our kitchen, the way we used to be, and she was laughing about something I'd said. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her face, radiant and alive, and feel the warmth of her presence. Then the dream shifted, the way dreams do, and she was crying, telling me to let her go, telling me I was killing myself by holding on, telling me she loved me, but I had to live. I woke up gasping, her name on my lips, and lay in the dark for hours trying to hold on to the sound of her voice. But it faded, the way it always did, and I was left with silence and the hollow ache of another day without her. I was 41 years old, and I felt ancient, worn down, done. Then the letter came. 5 years and 2 months after Emma's death, on a Tuesday morning that started with rain and the same mechanical routine I'd perfected. The envelope was plain, no return address, postmarked from across the state. I almost threw it away with the junk mail, but something made me open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in careful block letters. It read, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know nothing I say can change what happened or make it better. But there's something you should know about the day your wife died. Something I couldn't say in court. Couldn't tell anyone until now. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. To tell you the truth about what really happened. You deserve that much. I'll be at Riverside Park, by the North Bench, every Saturday at 2 o'clock for the next month. If you come, I'll be there. If you don't, I'll understand. But please consider it. There's more to the story, and I think it might matter to you. MT." I read it 3 times, then 10, then lost count. MT, Michael Torres. The man whose name I couldn't say had written to me was asking to meet, was claiming there was more to the story. My first instinct was to burn the letter, to refuse, to maintain the distance I'd built so carefully over 5 years. What more could there be? He'd run a red light. He'd killed her. The facts were simple, brutal, unchangeable. What possible truth could matter now? But the letter sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, and I couldn't stop reading it. There's something you should know. What didn't I know? What had he kept hidden? And why now, after 5 years of silence, was he reaching out? I told myself I wouldn't go, told myself every day that week. Saturday came, And I spent the morning running extra miles trying to exhaust myself into indifference. It didn't work. At 1:30, I found myself showering, dressing, getting in my car. At 1:50, I was parked near Riverside Park, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding like it might break through my chest. I could leave. I could drive away and never know what he wanted to tell me. But I'd spent 5 years not knowing. 5 years with questions I'd been too angry or too broken to ask, and suddenly, the not knowing felt worse than any answer could be. At 1:58, I got out of the car. At 2 o'clock, I was standing 20 feet from the north bench, staring at a man who'd haunted every nightmare I'd had for 5 years. He looked different than I remembered. Smaller, grayer, older in a way that went beyond years. He sat on the bench with his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the ground, and he didn't look up until I cleared my throat. When he did, I saw something in his face that shocked me. He looked haunted, hollowed out, like grief had carved pieces from him too. "You came," he said quietly, and his voice shook. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My throat was tight, my hands were fists, and I was using every ounce of control I had not to walk away or worse. He gestured to the other end of the bench. "Will you sit?" "No," I managed. My voice sounded foreign, rough with disuse and emotion. "Tell me what I need to know, then I'm leaving." He nodded, accepting that. Took a breath. "The accident," he started, and I flinched at the word. Accident. Like it was random, like it was fate, like it wasn't his fault. He saw the flinch and corrected himself. "What happened that day? You know I ran the red light. You know I was distracted, reaching for something. That's what I told the police, what I told the court. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." He paused, struggling. "I was reaching for my phone because I'd gotten a text from my daughter. She was 14. The text said, 'Dad, I need you, please,' and I panicked. I thought something was wrong, thought she was in danger, and I grabbed for the phone without thinking, without looking. I ran that light because for 3 seconds, I was a father terrified for his child, and I forgot everything else, including the road." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were wet. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm not telling you this to make it okay because it's not okay. I killed your wife. I live with that every day. But you should know that in those 3 seconds, I was trying to protect my child, and because of that, your wife died." The text. It was nothing. She'd forgotten her backpack at home and wanted me to bring it to school. Nothing. A 14-year-old being dramatic, and I overreacted, and Emma paid the price. I've replayed it 1,000,000 times. If I'd waited 5 seconds, if I'd pulled over, if I'd just ignored it. But I didn't, and she's gone, and I know you hate me. God knows I hate myself. But there's more. I was shaking. Whether from rage or grief or the sheer surreality of standing here listening to him, I didn't know. "What more could there possibly be?" I asked, and it came out harsh, sharp. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, held it toward me. I didn't take it. "After I got out," he continued, voice still quiet, still steady despite the tears now tracking down his face, "I couldn't just go back to life. Couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. I'd taken a life, destroyed a family, and sorry didn't cut it. So I started volunteering, teaching defensive driving courses to teenagers, giving talks at schools about distracted driving. I've spoken to over 10,000 kids in the last 3 years, and last month, I got this." He opened the folder himself, showing me a letter. A typed letter from a woman I didn't know, thanking him for his presentation at her son's school, saying that 2 weeks later her son was driving with friends who wanted him to text back while behind the wheel. He refused. Told them about Michael's talk, about Emma, about what one moment of distraction could cost. And because he refused, because he waited, he was able to stop in time when a car ran a red light in front of them. The woman's letter said, "Your story saved my son's life. I know it came from tragedy, and I know nothing can bring back the woman you lost, But I wanted you to know that her death meant something, that it's preventing other deaths. Thank you. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago. I've gotten 6 letters like this, Michael said, pulling out more. 6 times in 3 years where someone has written to tell me that hearing about Emma, about what happened, made them or someone they know drive safer, pay more attention, put the phone down. 6 lives. Maybe more I don't know about. And I know this doesn't fix anything. I know Emma is still dead, and I'm still the one who killed her. But I thought you should know that her death, God, I hate even saying it that way, that what happened to her has ripples, that it's meant something beyond the tragedy, that she mattered, and that in some broken, awful way she's saving people even though she's gone. I took the folder, opened it with trembling hands. Read the letters from strangers, thanking a man I'd hated for 5 years for teaching them to be careful, to pay attention, to remember that every person in every car is someone's Emma, someone's wife or daughter or mother or friend. The words blurred as tears finally came, 5 years of them stored up and now spilling over. I sank onto the bench, not caring that he was there, not caring about anything except the weight of this revelation. Emma's death had been senseless, random, a 3-second mistake that ended everything. But it wasn't just an ending. It was also a warning that people were actually heeding. My wife, who'd been so full of life and kindness and laughter, was saving strangers she'd never meet. And I'd had no idea. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, voice breaking. He shook his head. "Would you have listened? Would you have believed me? You couldn't even look at me in court." I didn't blame you then, and I don't now. I figured maybe someday, if enough time passed, if I had enough proof that something good was coming from something so terrible, maybe then you'd be willing to hear it. Maybe then it would matter. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong to reach out at all. Maybe this is just me trying to ease my own guilt. But I think about her every day. I think about you. And I wanted you to know that I'm not just living my life like nothing happened. I'm trying to make it mean something. Trying to honor her by preventing more tragedies. It doesn't make us even. It doesn't erase what I did. But it's something. It has to be something. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the rustle of wind through autumn leaves and the distant laughter of children playing somewhere in the park. I looked at the letters again, at the careful gratitude of strangers, at the evidence that Emma's death had created a ripple effect of awareness and caution. It didn't bring her back. It didn't make the pain go away. But it did something I hadn't experienced in 5 years. It gave her death a context, beyond senseless tragedy. It made it part of a larger story, one where loss could generate change, where pain could motivate prevention, where one woman's stolen future could help protect thousands of others. "I don't forgive you," I said finally, and my voice was steady now, calm. "I don't know if I ever will. What you did, the choice you made in those 3 seconds, it destroyed my life. It took the person I loved most. And I'm still angry. I'm still broken. But I believe you. I believe you're trying to do something meaningful. And I think Emma would want that. She was always about making things better, helping people. So if you're doing that in her name, if her story is saving lives, then keep doing it. Don't stop." He nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "There's one more thing," he said, and reached into the folder again. This time he pulled out a small envelope with my name on it, in Emma's handwriting. My heart stopped. They gave this to me with her personal effects after the accident. It was in her car. I held onto it because I didn't know how to get it to you. Didn't know if reaching out would make things worse. But I think now you should have it. I think she'd want you to have it. I took the envelope with shaking hands, recognizing her loops and curves immediately. She'd been writing me a note, probably that morning before leaving for work. I opened it carefully, terrified it would crumble, that this last piece of her would disintegrate in my fingers. Inside was a post-it note that read, "Don't forget we're trying that new Thai place tonight. Also, I love you to the moon. Also, I hid your favorite cookies behind the rice because I know you have no self-control. You're welcome. E." Such a small thing. Such a mundane, beautiful, heartbreaking small thing. A reminder of date night and hidden cookies, ending with the casual declaration of love that I'd heard 1,000 times and would never hear again. I pressed the note to my chest and let myself cry, really cry for the first time since the funeral. Not angry tears or grief tears, but something more complicated, mourning and gratitude and release all tangled together. Michael sat beside me, silent, giving me space, and when I finally caught my breath, he stood to leave. "Wait," I said, and he turned back. "What's your daughter's name?" He looked confused. "Sarah." "Why?" I took a breath. "Because Emma died while you were trying to protect Sarah. That doesn't make it okay. But it makes you human, and I think I needed to know that. That you weren't a monster, or careless, or cruel. You were just a dad who made a terrible mistake. It doesn't excuse it, but it helps me understand." "Thank you," he said quietly, "for meeting me, for listening. I know it wasn't easy." He was right, it wasn't. But it was necessary. For 5 years I'd carried a version of him in my head, a villain, a symbol of everything wrong with the world, a target for my rage. And he was just a man, flawed, guilty, broken in his own way, but trying to do better, to make amends, to turn tragedy into purpose. It didn't fix anything. Emma was still gone. I was still alone. The years I'd lost to grief and anger weren't coming back, but something had shifted. The story I'd been telling myself about that day, about him, about the pointlessness of her death, it had new chapters now. It was bigger, more complex, more real. I went home and read her note 20 more times. Then I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I opened the box under my bed full of unsent letters. I read through them, hundreds of pages chronicling my journey through grief, and then I did what I should have done all along. I started writing to Emma, not about anger or Michael Torres or the accident, but about us, about the life we'd had, the inside jokes and lazy Sundays and the way she'd steal bites of my food even when we ordered the same thing. The trip to Portland where we got caught in a rainstorm and laughed until we couldn't breathe. The night she told me she wanted to marry me, beating me to the proposal I'd been planning for weeks. I wrote about love, not loss, about presence, not absence. And slowly, word by word, I started to reclaim her memory from the tragedy that had overshadowed it. Over the following weeks, I made changes. Small at first, I scattered Emma's ashes in the river she loved, finally letting her rest. I cleaned the house, packed up her clothes to donate, turned her closet into a space for something new rather than a shrine to the past. I called her mother, her sister, apologized for disappearing, for shutting them out. They cried. I cried. We talked about Emma, about who she was beyond the woman who died, and it hurt, but it also healed something I didn't know needed healing. I started seeing the grief counselor again, actually engaging this time instead of just showing up. I learned that moving forward wasn't betraying Emma. It was honoring her by choosing to live rather than just exist. I also reached out to Michael, not regularly and not to become friends, but to understand his work better. He sent me information about his talks, about the programs he'd developed, about the statistics showing that distracted driving fatalities were decreasing in areas where he'd spoken. He asked if I'd ever want to share Emma's story myself, to add a victim's perspective to his presentations. I said no at first. Then 6 months after our meeting in the park, I said maybe. Then, 8 months after, I said yes. The first time I stood in front of a classroom of high school students and talked about my wife, about how much I loved her, about how she died because someone was distracted for 3 seconds. I thought I'd break apart. But I didn't. I told them about her laugh and her kindness and the future we'd planned. I told them that every person in every car they'd ever pass was someone's Emma, someone's entire world, and that paying attention wasn't just about following rules. It was about protecting the irreplaceable. They listened. Some cried. One girl came up after and hugged me, said her mom texts while driving all the time and she was going to beg her to stop. If Emma's story could save that girl's mother, could prevent another family from living through what I'd lived through, then maybe Michael was right. Maybe tragedy could have meaning beyond pain. I'm not fixed. I'm not over it. I don't think you ever get over losing the person you plan to grow old with. But I'm different now than I was 6 months ago, and different than I'll be 6 months from now. Grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes part of your story instead of the entire story. I still have hard days. I still miss her so much it physically hurts. I still avoid that intersection sometimes because the sight of it makes my chest tight. But I also have good days now. Days where I remember her and smile instead of breaking. Days where I feel grateful for the years we had rather than angry about the years we lost. Days where I'm okay with being alive, with having a future, with the possibility that life might surprise me again. Michael and I aren't friends, exactly, but we're something. Connected by tragedy but also by purpose, by the shared mission of making sure Emma's death saves lives instead of just ending one. We do presentations together now, a few times a month, and the impact is undeniable. Thousands of teenagers hearing our story, seeing our pain, understanding that distracted driving isn't an abstract concept. It's families destroyed, futures stolen, love erased. If even a fraction of them drive more carefully because of us, because of Emma, then we're creating something meaningful from something terrible. It doesn't make her death okay. It never will be. But it makes it matter in a way that helps me breathe a little easier. Last month, on the 6-year anniversary of Emma's death, I didn't spend it alone in the dark. I spent it at the river where I'd scattered her ashes, with her mother and sister, sharing memories and laughter and yes, tears, but the kind of tears that come from love rather than just loss. We told stories about her terrible singing voice and her competitive streak at board games, and the way she could always tell when you needed a hug, even if you didn't ask. We celebrated who she was instead of just mourning who she wasn't anymore. And when the sun set, we lit candles and sent them floating downstream, tiny lights carried away by current, and I whispered to her that I was okay, that I was living, that I missed her every day but that I was choosing forward instead of backward, that I hoped she was proud of me, that I loved her still, loved her always, loved her to the moon and back and beyond. The man who killed my wife gave me back a piece of her I thought was lost forever. Her final note, her handwriting, her voice. He showed me that tragedy can be transformed into purpose, that pain can motivate change, that even the worst moments of our lives can generate ripples of goodness if we're willing to do the hard work of meaning-making. I still can't fully forgive him. Maybe I never will. But I can work alongside him. I can channel my grief into prevention. I can honor Emma by helping to protect the Emmas who are still out there, still driving to work, still planning date nights, still writing love notes to their partners. Every life we save is a tribute to the life we lost. Every family that stays intact is a testament to how much mine was shattered, and a promise that we're fighting to spare others that same devastation. 5 years ago, I couldn't face the man who killed my wife. I couldn't say his name, couldn't imagine a world where we existed in the same space, couldn't see past my rage and grief. But what happened 5 years later changed everything, not because it erased the past or made peace easy, but because it gave me a choice. I could stay buried in anger, let it consume what was left of my life, or I could do something harder and braver and more complicated. I could acknowledge that he was human, that humans make terrible mistakes, and that sometimes the only way to survive tragedy is to transform it into something that matters. That's what Emma would have wanted. Not for me to suffer forever, but to live with intention, to love fully, to make her proud, even in her absence. So that's what I'm doing. Every day, with every talk, with every teenager who decides to put their phone down while driving, I'm making her death mean something beyond loss. I'm making sure her story doesn't end with a car crash but continues in the lives she's helped to save. If you've made it this far in our story, if you've sat with us through the hard parts and the healing parts, I want to ask you something. Don't just watch this video and move on. Really sit with what you've heard. Think about the people you love, about how quickly everything can change, about how every choice behind the wheel matters. Think about Emma, about me, about Michael, about all the families touched by distracted driving or preventable accidents. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something or think differently, help us spread that message. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss these stories, these reminders that every life matters and every moment counts. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us your thoughts or your own story. Be part of the ripple effect. Be the reason someone else pays attention, drives safer, chooses differently. Let Emma's story be the one that makes you or someone you know slow down, put the phone away, focus on the road. Let tragedy become purpose. Let loss become change. And let's all commit to protecting each other out there, because everyone you pass on the highway is someone's entire world, and they deserve to make it home. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Now let's make sure these stories matter by turning awareness into action, one driver at a time.